We are finally to Abraham. Yay. We made it. Yay us. So we're going to look at Abram, which is how he begins, who was a contemporary of Job. We looked at Job last week. They lived around the same era. And for the next 4 lessons, we're going to talk about Abraham. So if you remember from weeks ago, one of the lessons we talked about the general age of the earth, all that. So Abram lives right between Adam and Christ, which is interesting that Abram's in Genesis 12. That's how much time has gone by. So 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, 2,000 years from Abraham to Christ. And in the middle of that one is King David. So it's, you've got these major folks at these very clear lines. Interesting side note, Abraham was alive during Shem's lifetime, one of the sons of Noah. It's only 350 years or so after the flood. Again, we don't know if they interacted or did not interact. They didn't get around a lot then, not a lot of traveling. Though we're getting ready to walk through all the traveling that Abraham did do. And it was significant for his era, for sure. So let's start in Genesis 11, verse 27, and we'll go down to verse 9 of chapter 12. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. And Haran died in the presence of Terah, his father, in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, soon to be Sarah. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and the father of Iscah. And Sarai was barren. She had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to go to the land of Canaan. And they came as far as Haran and settled there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. And Yahweh said to Abram, "Go forth from your land and from your kin and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So Abram went forth as Yahweh had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions which they had accumulated and the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go forth to the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the oak of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. Then Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "To your seed I will give this land." So he built an altar there to Yahweh who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to Yahweh and called upon the name of Yahweh. And Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. So let's do what we do. Let's ask some questions about the text. Who are Abram's relatives mentioned in the passage? Got his wife, Lot, his nephew. Lot will come into play here in a little bit with Sodom and Gomorrah. Huh? Yeah, Haran, yep. Terah, his father. Mm-hmm. So you've got this kind of communal sort of living. That's how they did it in those days. When you got married, you went and got your wife, and you built a little place on the back of Dad's house and lived there all together. That's how you remained safe. So, Nathan, we should bring that back. What do you think? We can just add on a little. You can build it. If I can build it, well, you're going to be homeless. So, good for you. What do we learn about Sarai in verse 30? She's barren. She cannot have children. Again, this will become very important later in Abram's story. Where did Terah and his family travel from, and where did they travel to? Ur of the Chaldeans. And where do they settle? In Haran, which ironically enough is the name of his brother, but now they're in this land. What is their intended final destination? The land of Canaan. It's to get to Canaan. Where have we heard Canaan before? Do you remember? It's the promised land, yes. Where have we heard Canaan before? It's the promised land. It's in Genesis 10. Canaan is a grandson of Noah. And he settles, again, this is how the lands of the nations develop. Canaan settles, and it becomes the land of Canaan. And his descendants are the Canaanites. See how that works? So it all starts from one central person as he goes and anchors in. So this is how the Canaanites come to be in the land of Canaan. And God gets Abraham there. Does Terah, his father, make it to Canaan? No, he dies on the way in Haran at the age of 205. So in chapter 12, 1-3, one of the most important texts in all the Bible, describe the promises that God makes to Abram. What does he promise him? Not that. He looked at me like, what are you doing talking to me? So what are the promises that he makes? What? Make you a great nation. Yes. What else? I will bless you. Yeah, what else? I will make your name great. Yeah. He's going to be famous. Abraham will be very well known. And certainly is so. What else? All the families of the earth are going to be blessed through him. Now, how could it be that all of the families of the earth will be blessed through him? So scholars will look at Genesis 12 and say that's a messianic promise. Because it's through the nation of Israel that Israel's Messiah will come. And through him, the Gentiles, the prophets say, the nations, in him they will place their hope. Because you can't necessarily argue, you can make a small argument, you couldn't necessarily make a definitive argument that the whole world was blessed because of the nation of ancient Israel. It's not necessarily the case. They were defeated most of the time. But now in Christ, the whole world is blessed by this descendant of Abraham through the nation of Israel. So why are they traveling to Canaan? You're probably overthinking it. God told them to. Yeah. Leave your family, leave your home, leave everything that you know, and go to Canaan. Now, does he know where that's at? No, he does not. You just go, and when you get there, I'll tell you that you've arrived. What an act of faith, right? I mean, this is not how you go on vacation. We're just going to drive, and when we get there, we're just going to wait for God to say, all right, stop. You're good.
But that's usually how it turns out.
Yeah, it might turn out that way, but that's not the plan. We have Siri. Siri helps us here. Tells us where we are and where we're going and how long it's going to take to get there and every single turn on the way. He doesn't have any of that. It's just go, leave where you are, which we'll talk about why in a minute, and you go, and when you get there, you're gonna settle in. What's the promise that is given to him in verse 7? The land's going to be yours. So not only does he get there and he says, all right, you're here, it's yours. It's not going to belong to the Canaanites anymore. It's going to belong to my people, which, again, if you were here first service, and if not, you're getting ready to hear it at 10:30, when we look at Paul's sermon in Acts 13, he deals with this specific event as he walks through the history of Israel in his sermon. God drives out the 7 nations that are within the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, and gives to them the promised land. This is yours. So how old is Abram when he leaves Haran? He's 75. So he's already up there. You know, he's not a spring chicken anymore. So who goes into Canaan with him? Yeah, his wife and his nephew, Lot. That's it. So the party has shrunk now to just a bit. And obviously he's got all of his caravans with him. He's got all these slaves. In fact, at one point later on in Genesis, some raiding parties will come and attack him, and they'll take off with all of his stuff and all the women and all the stuff from his family. And the text will tell us from his own people, like his own family, his own slaves, whoever's comprising all that, he puts together an elite army of hundreds of men that go and defeat all the enemies and then rescues everybody and brings them back home. He didn't have to go and put together, he didn't do a draft. He just turned around in his living room. He's like, all right, you 350, let's go. This is a large group of people that he's got now that's traveling with him. It's just a small family unit, but an expansive group of people. How does Abram demonstrate faith in God's words to him? According to verse 4. He did exactly what God told him to do. He left. Yeah, he departed. We would like to think that if the situation was us, that we would do what he did. We would likely not do what he did. We would go, nah, I don't think so. I think I misheard. Nah, that's just maybe me wanting to do that because traveling is very unsafe for them. He's going to a place that he does not know. He's never been. He's leaving everything that he does know in the place he has been. This is truly venturing into the unknown. Cue the song from Frozen. Venturing into the unknown where he's never been, doesn't know anything about what's happening there, what he's going to face the whole way, yet without a moment's hesitation, he does exactly what God tells him to do. Yes, ma'am.
My version starts out, the Lord had said.
Yes.
At this point in time, is the Lord Abraham worshiping the Lord and hearing it, or is the Lord like visually appearing?
At this point, I would argue, Abram is not worshiping the Lord. That out of his very pagan background, which we'll talk about, a very pagan background, God just yanks him out of that and sends him to a new nation. That God initiates speaking to him. Abram is not a worshiper of Yahweh. He doesn't know Yahweh. God initiates, steps into all of that. So think the Apostle Paul at his conversion on the road to Damascus. He wasn't seeking after that. He didn't do anything. And Jesus just shows up and knocks him off the horse. That's what's happening here. God just speaks because God has chosen him, which we were emailing about this very week. So do you mind if I talk about your question? Because I would guess maybe there are others who would have it. And now you can't say no. I've said it publicly in front of everyone. So Kathy sent me this brilliant question this week, because last week we looked at Job, who's righteous and blameless in his generation, and now Abram, who's a contemporary. And who does God choose to birth the nation through? We know that Abram's messed up. He's a sinner. He's wretched. He's got a very pagan background. Then there's Job, and God doesn't birth Israel through Job. He does it through Abram. Why? That's a great question. The answer is, I don't know. Because when God elects his people, he chooses them, it is solely by grace. It's never because they earned it. So it certainly could be that God purposely chose Abraham because he doesn't deserve it, because he couldn't pick Job because Job would have deserved it. Why did God choose you? Ephesians 1:4. Before the foundation of the world, did you deserve that? No, it is solely his grace. He chose you before you were even born. So it couldn't have been because you have deserved anything that he's done. So God's choosing of his people from day one, from the very first one he chooses to work through in the world, has always been by grace to a person who did not deserve it. How gracious and kind is our God to do such a thing. And that's on display for us here with Abraham. So God appears to him, he gets to the land, and he builds an altar near Shechem. He doesn't stay there. He moves on to be between Bethel and Ai. And if you ever need to remember how to spell the city name Ai, it's Ai. I think I'm funny. So, whatever. He builds another altar there, and then he moves south out of there. So, in your handout, turn to the map. We have a map. Because we can look at now where he's been. GPS. Yes, this is the ancient GPS. He travels with his father and with Lot from Ur all the way to the right, all the way in the east. To Haran, it's about 600 miles on foot. What? How long will that take? Long time. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, so this isn't just him walking. He's got flocks and herds and all of these people, kids. You've traveled with kids in a car. That's bad enough. They're not slowing you down because they're literally in the car. You're going 70. They're still going 70 with you, except for all the, never mind. He's got all of this, animals stopping to give birth, animals dying. This is years of traveling, one day after another. And again, we get this impression as we read through these accounts that every day God was saying, all right, yeah, you made a little bit further tomorrow, here's where I want you to go. God speaks to him every couple of decades. That's it. We have no record of any of this communication in between those periods of time. Think of the faith this requires. Think of the memory this requires. No wonder Abraham is known as the father of faith. Later, again, he will believe God and it will be credited to him as righteousness. A salvation statement that the New Testament now will pull into the book of Romans and say, yeah, that's how you're saved too. You believe God. You trust him. This is where it begins. He trusts God even when his eyes cannot see any of that. So he likely travels along the Euphrates River where there's water, there's life. When you're away from that, there's desert. You don't want to do that. They stay in Haran, it seems, for some time, though from the text we don't know how long. He stays there. Terah dies. Abraham and Lot go south towards Canaan. That's another 400 miles to get to Canaan. They stop in Shechem. They move to Bethel, 20 miles away. After that, there's a famine. And because of the famine, they have to go all the way down into Egypt, which is a great account of what happens there. And eventually, they do return to Canaan, but that's for a lesson to come to be named later. So what we know from archaeological evidence of the city of Ur, there are two of them that we found, and the one that he's from is the one that's there on the map. The city of Ur is built primarily around the idolatrous worship of a false god, sometimes known as Nana, N-A-N-N-A, not like your grandma, but Nana, or known as sin, S-I-N, ironically enough, the god of sin. So historically, this false god is referred to as Nana Sin. It's the moon god. Abraham worshiped the moon because everyone in Ur worshiped the moon. Everything in life was built around worshiping the moon. Because if you can please the false god, I'm not sure how you make the moon happy, but if you can please the false god, your life gets blessed. That's the background that God calls Abraham out of. He's not a God worshiper. He worships the moon. He's a pagan idolater. And God simply steps in and yanks him out of that and sends him to a new nation. Solely by his grace. We learn some more information later about Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, Abram, Sarai, in Genesis chapter 20. You don't have to turn there, we'll get there. And what we learn is that Sarah is the half-sister of Abraham. Different mother, but they are related technically as brother and sister, which comes into play, doesn't it? In chapter 12, when they get to Abraham, what does Abraham say to Sarah? Say to them that you are my sister. Why? Because she is. Now, Terah got around. Terah was a man about town. Yeah, he went clubbing. So he's got all these children. They marry one another. That's what you had to do. You know, you married within your family, depending on how far out you go. So here's what Abraham does when he gets there. He's afraid the Egyptians are going to kill him. They're going to see how beautiful his wife is, and they're going to kill him and take her. So to protect himself, he's like, just tell him you're my sister. So maybe Abraham's sin there isn't as bad as we once thought. Like, what a coward. Yeah, that you would just, I'll tell him, to save his own skin. Puts her in harm's way to save himself. But what has he done? It's still a half-truth. This is the danger, the insidious nature of sin, isn't it? It's not an outright lie. I didn't lie. She is my sister. No, you lied because you're a liar. Because you're a pagan idolater and you worship the moon, you idiot. That's what I would have said if I was there. So he gives this half-truth and twists the truth because it suits him and it protects him. This is what sin does. This is how we sin. What is it that Satan is really good at? He takes a little bit of truth and he just twists it. To the point where he quotes scripture a lot in the Bible, doesn't he? But what's he doing with it? He's twisting it. He's manipulating it. This is what we do. We sort of lie. We sort of sin. No. There is no sort of. We did. You lied. You sinned. There's no halfness to it. Now turn to Hebrews 11. Let's talk about this for a few minutes before we are done. Hebrews 11 is a very famous chapter, and rightly so. It's known as the faith chapter. 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter. Hebrews 11 is the faith chapter. Some have called it the Hall of Faith, playing off the Hall of Fame, and understandably so. Because the author of Hebrews, again, in Hebrews is a sermon manuscript, so this is someone preaching through this. They're preaching through Israel's history, building the case that it was all by faith. By faith, Abraham, by faith, Noah, by faith, all these different heroes of the faith throughout the Old Testament. Let's start in verse 8. We'll get on to verse 16. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she regarded him faithful who had promised. Therefore, there were born even of one man, and him as good as dead at that, as many as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. All these died in faith, without receiving the promises. But having seen them, and having welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And indeed, if they had been remembering that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they aspire to a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he prepared a city for them. This is a great text. This is really good. That provides New Testament commentary on what Abraham has just done in Genesis 12. It looks back and says, this is what's really going on in Genesis 12. It's not just he left this place and went to another place. Oh no, there's a lot happening here. He's able to obey God by faith. Does he know where he's going to settle? No. He lives in tents. How is he able to do that? By faith. He trusts God's taken me somewhere. I can't see it right now. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where I'm going. But I trust that God is taking me somewhere. But notice what it says. What was Abraham waiting for as he's dwelling in tents, moving from place to place? He's looking for a city, a permanent dwelling that has foundations. Tents don't have foundations. Ours are nylon. They're anchored to the ground that you just pick up and move. You can't do that to a city that has foundations. So where is Abraham's hope? Eternity. That yes, here's what I'm doing now. God's got me wandering around. I'm a sojourner here. I'm an exile here. I'm a foreigner here. I don't belong here. Because he's traveling around, and none of these people are his people. And he's fighting battles, and they're attacking him, and all this stuff is going down. And all his hope is, this will eventually land in an eternal dwelling where I will be forever. The architect and the builder of that city is God himself. I now just have this temporary thing, but now I'm going to have this in the future. Friends, this is our story, right? What does Peter tell the believers? Consider yourselves as aliens and strangers here. You don't belong here. These aren't your people. You go out into the world, these aren't your people. You're a stranger to them. If you're walking with Christ, you don't make sense to them. You're outside of them, which is why church is so important, because these are our people. When we get together, this is like a meeting of a united nation. This is us. And what are we doing? We're just wandering through life, from place to place, going through whatever it is the Lord has for us. But where is our hope? The eternal dwelling with God. We look to him. We look to that forever dwelling where we're home with our people, with our God, where we'll live forever. That's our hope. So what's interesting about Hebrews 11 is it's known as the faith chapter. I would argue it's the hope chapter, because this isn't the only time this comes up. So you've got this, he's looking forward to the heavenly city. Yes, by faith he's doing these things, but it's in hope of what's coming for him. It continues on, and you've got Joseph's bones that, take my bones out of here and take them into the promised land. It's all about hope. It's all about looking forward to what the Lord has. They die without ever seeing the promise fulfilled. Again, this is in the sermon today. They die without seeing that promise fulfilled. And do they care about that? No. No, it doesn't bother them at all. Why? They've been looking forward beyond their own life into eternity the whole time. So we're not bent out of shape if God doesn't deliver on the time frame we want him to deliver on, because our eyes have been on eternity the whole time anyway. We're focused on that, and that makes all the difference for how I live right now, today, in this very moment, no matter what it is that the Lord would call me to, that requires faith and to trust in him. It's okay. It's not my home. That one is, and my eyes are set there. Everything changes when you do that. Yes, sir. I would not say that, but I don't know. Yeah. So you said, would you say that Job wasn't looking towards that? Yeah. He certainly could have been. Job was quite wealthy, had a lot of stuff. It could have been that, Job's attention is here. Abraham is quite wealthy as well. Yeah. So, this isn't a big deal. Yes, sir. Michael Beavers. Yes, it is. We all love Michael Beavers. So, to say, I hope I win the lottery, it's a false hope. It's an empty hope, isn't it? Even if you've played it, still a false hope. You're not going to win. Can't win if you don't play, can't win if you do. That's the reality of all of this. So, it's an empty hope would be, I hope the Cubs win the World Series. See what I did there? You're welcome. God bless you, my son. My job is to preach truth. So that's the kind of whimsical, wishing kind of things. Gee, I hope that. That is not biblical hope. Biblical hope is, here's my definition, the confident expectation of an assured event. The confident expectation of an assured event. So when I say my hope is in heaven, it's not, gee, I wish that heaven were real. It is the confident expectation that is real and that is where I am going. It is as good as done. Amen. That is hope. Hope is the posture forward, not looking in the rearview mirror. It's the posture forward. I'm going towards something, that the best days are always ahead. Even if they're terrible between now and then, the best days are always ahead, because that is where I am going, and it is definitive. Why? How do I know that? Well, it just so happens that God wrote a book and told you that by faith in Christ, that's exactly what you get. And has God ever let down anyone who he made a promise to? No. Therefore, it's as good as done. That, my friends, is hope. So, 1, 2, 3, go team. See you next week.